this is Lisa Phillips, and welcome to AffordableRealEstateInvestments.com. It's where I give you an honest and practical guide to real estate investing at a price you can afford. Today's guest, I am very honored to say, is Chad Carson. I met Chad Carson at a local bloggers conference, who also happened to be a Bigger Pockets contributor. And once I started talking to him and got his story, it was very intriguing because you guys know creative financing has been a big hallmark of what I've had to do. And the first thing out Chad's mouth was like, I was a broke college student. I couldn't get financing, so I went into seller financing, and I love it. So he's the first person who's been able to break this down in such a way that I can understand it clearly and concisely. And he's going to say not only of what he's doing today, but why he got involved in real estate investing and why he thinks seller financing is the way to go. So thank you so much, Chad. Thank you for taking the time to share with our audience everything you've learned about that first time.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Lisa. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Good. Thank you so much. If you can you go a little bit into your REI story, your current business, and how you got started in real estate investing?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. So I guess in the nutshell, I'm a full-time real estate investor, and so I've been doing this for about 13 years. And when I graduated from college, I got started, and I'll start with now and just give you a snapshot. I primarily do rental properties. I'm a landlord, and I have my own little business. And what you can see in the background here, this is my office in the basement. So I'm sort of I like to describe it as a lifestyle investor. I don't try to get big and take over the world and syndicate my way to being Donald Trump or something. I like to have rental properties, use the income they make, flip a few properties, and then use that to have a lot of fun and to be on interviews with people like you and have good conversations. And so that's a lot of what I'm about, getting the nuts and bolts of real estate, using that cash flow and that stuff and that kind of stuff to actually live a really cool life. So that's sort of a nutshell. But you asked about how I got started, and the reason we're talking about this today with seller financing is when I graduated from college, I was sort of one of those routes trying to figure out, what are you going to do with your life? And I was a biology major in college, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll go to medical route, or maybe I'll go work for another business or something. But I was fortunate enough that I didn't have any college debt. I got a scholarship to go to college and play sports, and so when I had some options, and so I just sort of explored the idea of going and being an entrepreneur, and I had sort of just had that itch to do it, and I'm really happy I did because it was more of a impulse of like, I don't want to go work for somebody else. I don't want to wear a suit. I don't want to do all those things that
Hmm.
I'd been part of a team and gone to meetings and done all these things. And I was kind of done with it. I wanted to do my own thing, be an entrepreneur. And so I started just being a deal finder. I had literally $1,000 in my bank account. I had no debt and $1,000 in my car. So it was really, and I lived in a spare bedroom of a friend and some family, and for the first 2 years of doing that. And so made a little bit of money here and there, saved money, but I learned the business and I learned how to find deals and I learned how to structure financing without going to the bank because I didn't have a job. I was not a W-2 type employee, which is what most banks want to see. And so I had to get creative. I had to think outside the box. And a big part of that, so there's two main ways I did that, but some of it was going and talking to sellers who owned a property and were willing to participate with me and finance the property to me, which we'll talk about some in more detail. And the other, I would also go to just individuals, so other investors, other people I met. I met a professor at Clemson University where I went to school, and I started talking to him about real estate and what I was doing, and he happened to have some other properties. And so you find people like that who are willing to work with you one-on-one instead of not just a bank going and applying for a loan, people who have money who are willing to invest with you. And so that's been more my story of getting those relationships and those people who work with you and help you make money and you make them money too. It's a really good kind of win-win long-term arrangement.
Okay, and before we get into seller financing and what it is and how you've applied it, tell me what financial independence means to you, because one of the first few things you mentioned was I do this so I have the ability to do what I want. And I'm not trying to be Donald Trump, which sometimes that seems to be what everyone tells you. You have to be Donald Trump, that you have to go big or go home. And it's
Mhm.
like, why can't I just go comfortably middle class and
Yeah,
be happy with that security, you know? So can you tell me a
absolutely.
little bit more about financial independence, which I know I'm searching for every day,
Yeah.
but tell me what it means to you, because it's different. Wealthy is very different from
Hmm.
person to person. I had someone on my last interview who's like, "Hey, I own, maybe I I do real estate investing full time, and I have enough money to cover it so I don't have to work a full time job. I feel wealthy since I have that money coming in and I can do what I want during the day, even though it's not millions of dollars. And I love that. So, can you tell me what this means, financial
Yeah.
independence means to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I love your question because I like how I think we both share this is you start with the why of your real estate business. And there's so many different reasons why people are doing this, but that to me has been the motivation all along. And my business partner and I tell this story sometimes to each other and to other people that we feel like it's sort of like we've been climbing a mountain to financial independence. And along the way, what's really cool about entrepreneurship and real estate is there's a lot of plateaus along the way. And so ultimately you're trying to get to this point, for me at least, is where you have investments that produce enough income to cover your lifestyle forevermore. And so by lifestyle, I mean your personal family overhead. So whatever it is that takes, to pay your bills, to do the things you want to do, you have investments doing that instead of having to go work a day job. So that's kind of like the peak of the mountain. But for me, what's been really cool is that starting as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of plateaus along the way where you can get a little bit more freedom, a little bit more
Yes.
freedom, a little bit more freedom. And so for me in the very beginning, that first step that I didn't really realize what I was doing, but learning how to just make some money on your own as an entrepreneur, go flip a house, manage a property, assign a deal to somebody else, those kind of skills, when you can do that, when you can use your brain and your skill set to go make money instead of having to apply for a job, that's a form of security. I mean, that really is independence
Yeah.
in term, and we don't glorify that enough. We think we have to have 100 properties and do these kind of things to actually be independent, but it's really, hey, I just flipped a house and made 15 grand or 20 grand, and I did it on my own. I did it with a small team, and so that for us was, hey, the first 3, 4, 5 years, let's just figure out how to make some money, do it on our own, scrape by, and but then at some point, to your point about financial independence, we knew that owning rental properties, income properties, was the name of the game for us. That was the route we were going to take. And so we had to start acquiring some properties because at some point you want that income to come in regularly every single month.
Hmm.
And I have not found a better way to do that than rental properties. You can look at dividend stocks, you can look at notes, which I like a lot. I like owning some notes here and there and being the bank for other people. But rental properties for years and years and years and years, before they had banks, before they did that, people leased other things to each other. And that's just a core standard way you can build wealth and have security financially. And so all the stuff you're teaching that I'm helping people with is a really awesome tool
Hmm.
to do whatever else it is you want to do with your life. And for me, that's travel. I have two little kids, 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and we like to travel and backpack abroad and go learn foreign languages. My wife's a Spanish teacher. And so for us, travel, flexibility, ability to do different things is more of the currency than just having a bunch of money piled in the bank. It's using money to do those kinds of things. And so it's not letting the tail wag the dog. It's the other way around. Business is the vehicle. Your life is the driver. That's what's controlling this whole deal.
Beautiful. I couldn't have said it better myself. I love my vision is similar, but we all have our different things, and that's just as
Mm-hmm.
inspiring as anything else because I know there's so many people in the audience who wants the same thing for themselves and their family. And like you said, it's just these baby steps and be okay with taking a baby step even if people look at you crazy or they say
Yeah.
don't do it or they're scared, but just we have to do it otherwise you're never going to accomplish what your goal or dream is and I think that's a shame. And
Yeah. I
so
agree.
can we go a little bit more into what seller financing is, breaking it down about how is it win-win for both of you guys so you can bring that to the surface
Sure.
and who the
Yeah. And
sellers are.
yeah, sometimes I like to just boil it down really simply, and I kind of need this for myself. I got this little chalkboard in the background. That's why I sometimes just draw stuff, and I just got to see it. And when you think about every real estate transaction and just simplify it down to like the most basic idea. And the basic idea is you have one party is a seller, one party is a buyer, right? And so those people, the seller has a property, the buyer in an ideal world has money, and so that you give them money, they give you the property, you're both happy. Now, if we all had a bunch of money piled sitting around, then that wouldn't work. We wouldn't have to do anything else. We wouldn't have to go to a bank. But typically, what happens, all of us know, is that you go to a bank, you get a line of credit, you do something where a third party gives you the money, and then you bring that money to the closing. And so there's always a third party involved in a transaction almost all the time in traditional real estate. But what I'm saying here is that you can exclude that third party, particularly when the seller has equity in the property. So what I mean by that is if the seller owns a $50,000 property and they own it free and clear, which you would not believe how many people own their properties free and clear.
Hmm.
It's just every single day you find there's lots and lots of people who own them free and clear. They're just kind of they're not the ones putting their houses on the market house on the market necessarily. They're sort of the quiet. There's vacant houses here and there. There's people who've owned them for 30, 40 years. And so that person who owns the house free and clear can do whatever they want. They could sell it for cash and get their money, or they could sell you the house and take $5,000 down from me and then let me make them payments, installment payments over time, and they could be my bank basically. And so that's really, there's a lot of details that you can go either way, but that's really the boiled down version of seller financing is finding a seller who is willing to receive payments over time or some kind of terms where they don't get all their cash up front.
And you also mentioned you give them equity sometimes, correct? Where if it's a 50,000, you say 50,000 cash, but 60,000 seller finance. So you gave them $10,000.
Yeah, so yeah,
They
good,
wouldn't be
good.
getting it.
Yeah, you brought that up is that sometimes what my technique is, and we can talk, it'd be fun to talk about some of the negotiation, how you get some of these deals. But what I might do is I might offer them two offers or three offers sometimes. I give them multiple choices. And here they are, they've been sitting there not getting an offer, or they've been sitting here with a house that's run down and they're sick of it, and all of a sudden here I am giving them two or three offers to buy their house. What in the world? This is amazing. And
Yeah.
so one of them might be cash, and cash is me going to a third party, to a private lender, or using my own money. And so that's my lowest number. And I know you teach people how to analyze the deal, know how much to pay. But my second offer, and I'm willing to pay a little bit of a premium if I get really good terms over a long, long time period. So I'm willing to pay the seller a little bit more if they give me really good terms. And so I might offer them 60,000 bucks if they will finance it to me with $5,000 down, $300 a month for the next 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and so it'd be interesting. There's a lot of math, just a little basic math behind that, but the concept is if you had to go to the bank and get a $300 a month payment for the next 15 years, that might be a difficult thing to do. But this seller, if they finance it to you for 300 a month, you can then go rent it for 600 bucks a month and just collect the rent and pay that loan down over the next 15 years and own it free and clear. And so that's the way I got started. There's just some fixer-upper properties, some people who owned them, and I sent them letters, or I drove by the house and saw that it was vacant and tracked them down and figured out who the owner was. And we would sit down and talk after I reached out to them. And that's the key thing, is that if you're looking for these things just to fall on your lap, that's not the way these kind of creative deals work. You actually have to put them together. It starts off with a lead where somebody raises their hand and says, "Yeah, I'd like to sell my house." But they don't raise their hand and say, "Yeah, I'd like to sell you my house with seller financing at $300 a month for the next 15 years." That's not the way it's worked for me. The way it's worked for me has been more like a slow dance. It's where they call me, they say, "Hello, I want to sell my house. I got your letter." And I don't just say, "Hey, will you sell it to me at 60,000 with 5,000 down?" I say, "Yeah, let me come. I'd love to look at your house. Let me come walk around in it, take a look. We'll do the normal thing, go look around everything, make notes of repairs, and then I'll come back for another appointment, typically, and I'll sit down with a simple piece of paper and I'll write my offers on that. I'll either type them out or just handwrite them on a piece of paper, and we sit there with that nice simple offer and we discuss it. And at that point, when I put the numbers on paper for them, then we really figure out, what's their motivation, what are they trying to do, and they might say, "No, 50,000 bucks doesn't work, but I might do 60,000 bucks, but I need a little bit more here or there." And so we'll
Mm-hmm.
start having a conversation at that point. But I never would have gotten to that point. And here's the key thing about seller financing is that the transaction, the terms, the numbers are secondary to primarily trying to build trust with somebody. So it's not gimmicks. It's not trying to, you know, give them a technique or use NLP or some kind of weird negotiation technique. It's basically me meeting Lisa, you're the seller,
Mm-hmm.
and us talking, and you feeling comfortable with me that I'm a good person, that I'm somebody's going to do what I'm going to say I'm going to do,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what it takes for somebody to be willing to leave their equity in the house with you, is that they have to know you, like you, feel you're competent, and at that point it all opens up, because then you can make that offer to say, "Hey, would you mind doing this?" And if you had just done that cold off the street and emailed them an offer or send them a letter with an offer, the likelihood is like almost zero that you're going to get that accepted. But if you take the approach of a slow dance, "Hey, I'm going to get to know them. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to learn what their motivation is. Why are they doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Then I can sit down with them and frame that whole number conversation around their life, their motivations, and say, this 300 a month could pay for your grandson's utility bill, or it could pay for your insurance bill, because I knew that was an issue because they told me that. So it's just sort of that person side of the business is really important if you want to do these kind of deals.
Can you tell me who these sellers are? And then we'll get into how you contact them, how you track them down, and your mailings. But first, who are these people that you've
Hmm.
seen, and what's the array of different reasons they've been that you found them and been willing to do this with you?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a wide variety of situations, but I think I could boil down the most likely candidates, maybe, just so your people who are listening to this aren't overwhelmed with it.
Yeah.
Some of the most likely candidates would be, and I'm just at the top of the list, would be, let's think about a landlord who's owned a property for 30 or 40 years. Now, the common theme with that, and if you've been studying Lisa stuff and you know how to manage a property, you know how to keep it up, you're not likely to be as motivated later on because you've learned how to manage properties, you've learned how to keep it up. But the vast majority of people don't do that. They don't get educated, and so
Um,
there are going to be some people over time who put bad tenants in the property, who don't save money for capital expenses.
right,
Property kind of runs down, and so at
right.
some point, I've had these moments myself as a landlord, where you will find a day when a tenant has just rubbed you the wrong way, when something happens, your life's happening, the rental property's happening, where you're like, you know what? I do not want to own this property anymore. It might
Yeah.
be one specific property. I've been there. And
Baltimore.
so,
I'm just kidding.
yeah, and so, if somebody sends you a letter or has been sending you letters at that point, as a landlord who's kind of a burned out landlord, you might say, I'm going to call this person and just see what's going on. So that's an ideal candidate for a couple of reasons. One is that landlord has already been receiving monthly payments for a long time. They're used to getting terms, monthly payment. They like that. In
Yeah.
fact, they know the value of getting a regular check
Income.
every single month. And so you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to convince them that that's a good thing. They know it's a good thing. They've been doing it for years. But their main problem is they're tired of the management, they're tired of the headaches. And so they might not know that seller financing is a solution, but when you present it in a way to say, once you get to know them and the slow dance, you present it in a way that says, I would love to buy your property. Here's the way I can buy it and still make it work for me. But the other thing is, if you sell it to me this way, um, you never have to have another vacancy again. You never have to do another turnover. You never have to get a call about a leaky toilet. You will get a check from me on the first of the month or earlier every single month for the next 15 years without fail. And that's a pretty powerful thing to say. We've now turned that rental property, which is sort of a hassle for them, into a passive income stream for
Mm-hmm.
them. And so that's the selling point. It's easier with landlords, although I've had other people who were, inherited the property or
Right.
other situations. But landlords are really your best candidate because for that reason, and also there's some other tax reasons. If somebody's owned a property for 30 years, it might have gone up in value. They might have bought it for 15,000 or 20,000. Now it's worth 60. So they have a capital gain on that property. And if they sell it all in one year, then they might have a tax hit. And so there's something called an installment sale treatment with IRS.
Mm-hmm.
And so for people who aren't familiar with that, that's just a fancy term for saying you don't take your money all at one time. And so the IRS doesn't make you pay taxes on all that money all at one time. You
Oh,
can
good. Yeah.
spread it out over this year, next year, next year, next year, next year.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a CPA kind of conversation you'd want your person to have talk to. But you should just know, as a person who's looking to invest in real estate, is that you could talk to a seller and say it might be beneficial to sell it with an installment sale to help you with your taxes. You should talk to your CPA about it, but that's another benefit.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And before we get into your first seller financing deal, tell me, you said you do direct mail and that you track them down. Can you talk a little bit about how many mailings do you send out and where do you mail to
Mhm.
um, before you get a lead? Like, is it 100 or is it like 10 well qualified? And how do you
Right.
qualify them? And then if it's a vacant, what are the standard processes you use to track them down to present an
Mhm.
offer?
Yeah, good question. So in general, I have like multiple campaigns to different kinds of lists, and in my own business, I turn this volume up and down on how many letters I send out. It just depends on how many deals I want to do. And so at some points in my career, I've been sending out thousands of letters per month, and that's when you really to get a volume. you need to assume that an amazing mail campaign where you got an amazing response would be 10%. If you send out 100 letters and you got 10 calls, you're off the charts. You're doing amazing. More likely is you're going to get one or two calls off of those 100 letters. And
Hmm.
so the kind of the rough math I look at is you probably want to talk to four or five people before you have one that's kind of promising that you want to go out and look at and make an appointment with. And so to do that, you might have to send 500 letters, 300 to 500 letters to get maybe that one or two appointments that are pretty good. And so that's sort of a rule of thumb. You need to be thinking about I might have to spend. It's not that is not necessarily like a brand new beginner game. I would say once you've done a deal or you've saved up a few $1,000s, you reinvest that money in marketing because it costs about if you outsourced it to somebody else, it might cost about $1 a letter. If you did it yourself, you have to pay for the stamp and the envelope. It might be 50 cents per letter. But either way, if you send 500 to 1,000 letters, that's $250, that you're going to spend doing it,
Who
at the cheapest. So,
who are you mailing these to? Because that's a lot of addresses. So how do
yeah.
you qualify that these are sellers willing to sell?
Yep. So one of the main lists I would recommend is like an out of town owner list. And that's sort of my kind of standard kind of core list that you would send for this kind of campaign. So what you can do is there's lots of different every part of the country has different software to do this on, but there should be some kind of software you can get either through a local realtor or there's tax record companies where you can get a list of all the tax records in your county. And what you do then is you sort and get somebody who knows how to sort spreadsheets and does that by all the people who own a property in your town but live somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
ideally like in another county, another state.
Okay.
And so you end up with a list of people they call these absentee owners or out of town owners. And so you send letters to those people with a thinking that hey, they're out of town, they own the property or they live in another property. This is a rental property for them. And I'm going to try to kind of it's almost like you're just sifting through people to figure out who are the people who are more likely to do that. So that's a good list. The other one that I recommend is all the time that I've never stopped doing ever, ever, ever is just driving for dollars. And by that I mean driving neighborhoods and telling everybody else I know to drive neighborhoods and look for vacant houses and for sale by owners and for rent by owners. So anytime you see any house that's not a listed MLS kind of house, so
Mm-hmm.
it could be vacant, it could have a for rent sign in front of it, it could be a for sale by owner, and you're going to either call them if it's a sign in the yard to start talking to them, or if it's a vacant property, you're going to write down the address, put it on a list, go home, look on the internet, figure out who the owner is, go into your tax records online, and then you send them a series of letters. So I would send them two or three letters in a row, and just very, very basic. It could be general to say, hey, my name is Chad Carson. I'm interested in buying a house on the street where you own a property.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interested in selling, please give me a call. And if you're not interested in selling, please save this letter and give me a call back later. That's it. I mean, it could be super basic and very personal. That's sort of my approach. And then you'll get some calls and you talk to them. And as I said before, you start asking questions and seeing if the house is something that meets your criteria. And you go out and start doing the slow dance.
I love it. Can you go a little bit more? Because I think that was really good for everyone who's out there who might want to do it themselves. So I know now I can go to the local clerk's or assessor's office and ask if they have that list, or call the RIA to ask if they have that list, right? And that's
Yes,
basically what you did.
exactly.
Called
Yeah,
around until you found it.
exactly. Yes. Call around. You can go on Bigger Pockets. You can go to your local RIA. You can go to
Mm-hmm.
find other areas where other investors are hanging out. Everybody will know where these lists are. It's like you have to figure out how to do these kind of lists because as an investor, I mean, I look at it 10, 20 times a day, some of these records companies. So you really have to figure out a way. A lot of them are free. My county where I invest is free online. And so if you can start there. I've started very, very low overhead. I'm a, keep your overhead low, work in your basement,
Mm-hmm.
spend as little as you can early on marketing, but you can sort of bootstrap this. But at some point, you might any money you're going to reinvest in your business. The best money to me is two things: education and marketing. Those are your two high ROI money
Yep.
kind of investments. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you do those two things and you continually
Yes,
feed
sir.
that funnel,
Mm-hmm.
then you start getting good things coming to you.
Good, good. Can we now, everyone in this, the majority of my audience are new investors, which is why they like to come here. And so even though you now own, I think, 55 units with a partner, can you walk us through that first seller financing deal? And just like, and go into details like how you first got in front of them, how the negotiation went, and then
Yeah,
like the part that's a bit of a cloud I don't get, like the lawyer, what
yeah,
paperwork, who services this loan.
yeah,
Those are the details that would be great. So if you could
yeah,
walk us through your first deal, knowing that they all might look a little differently, that would be very
sure.
helpful.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So my very first deal started just like we were talking about. I sent a letter out, and I sent a lot of letters out actually. And so I got a call from a sweet lady on the other end of the phone who said, "Yeah, I got your letter, and somebody else told me." The first thing she said was, "Somebody else told me not to call you." That gets your attention, right? Wow, they told you not to call me. Why did they tell me? And she said, "I
Yeah.
talked to a realtor." She said, and I told her I got a letter from an investor, and that's like a bad word, for some, they're good realtors and bad realtors, but there's some that, oh, you would never want to sell to an investor. That's horrible. And she said, but I looked you up on Google, and I think you're a nice guy,
Nice.
and I want to meet with you. I said, wow, I'm glad that everything was good on Google. But we met, and here was where I sort of discovered about the slow dance was the reason I got off the phone, and so I knew that general location was in my territory. So I think everybody's a newbie or an experienced investor ought to have territory or territories
Yeah.
where you say that's my farm market. That if I know that market, I know it really well, and I know that if somebody calls me in that market, I know the streets, I know the values, and so I sort of know whether it's worth my while to go look at that street or not. Because, and I know you do this a lot with your, choosing a neighborhood, maybe that get out in the neighborhood, walk around, figure out if it's a good location or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew this location. I knew I liked it. It was a brick ranch, which is my area. That's kind of my standard rental house, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, brick ranch with a crawl space. So it met my criteria. The thing was, though, that a lot of people might have not gone on this appointment because she was asking a price that was like, she was asking about 115. And in my area, 120, 125, I thought was the value of this house. And so most people would have said, you know what, I don't know. There's no money to be made there. It's just a little bit of money. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but I asked her a key question. I started asking a few other questions, and I said, "How long have you owned the property?" They had owned this property for a long time. Is this lady that I was talking to and her husband? They were both Methodist, retired Methodist ministers. Their family grew up in this house. It was a special place to them, and they had rented it out to some tenants who tore the property up. And so they were, it was kind of heartbroken for them because that's the place where their kids, they can remember their baby crawling on the carpet right there, right where this person threw a bunch of oil on the living room carpet, and they were just like very frustrated, and they were ready to get out of the landlord game. They did not want to rent their property anymore. And so that was their motivation. I kind of sensed that they had some motivation, but I also asked them they'd owned it a long time, and in the conversation I learned that they had paid it off, is that they owned it free and clear. And so those are two key words that said, all right, they're not asking a really low price right now, but they do own it free and clear, and there's a little bit of motivation, so I'm going to go on this appointment. And I might have talked to 3 or 4 other people that day who did not have some of those kind of key criteria. And so for a new investor, you have to learn how to pre-screen a little bit on the phone. And I don't want to pre-screen too much because you might eliminate some of the deals, especially early on. But you want to go on appointments and learn to talk to people. And so that's what I did. I said, I'm going to go talk to her. And when we got there, the house is vacant. She had brought a little card table. She had her husband carry the card table in and said, she basically took control of the whole negotiation. She said, "Young man, this is how it's going to work." And I said, "All right, let's go." And so she put the card table down and she brought chairs. She said, "We're going to sit down and talk to each other and get to know each other a little bit." I said, "Okay, great." And so this is very different than a lot of people might portray a real estate investor kind of, hey, go in there, analyze the house. What's the least you could take if I paid you cash and closed next week? If I would have if I would have said that to them, I would have offended them, and they would have never done this deal with me. And so I think that the emphasis there is that every negotiation is a little different, but it's a people game. This is a game of it. You're born with 2 ears and one mouth, and you need to use it in that ratio. You need to listen more. You need to sense what's going on in the negotiation. And it's not, negotiation is not even a good word to use. This is a give and take. This is them and this is you. They're a person. You're a person. You're there to figure out, how can I help this person? I'm a real estate investor, but what is it? What service am I going to offer them? because I know that if I can offer a good service, I will make money, they'll be happy. And so that's the attitude when you go in. And so we sat down, we talked. It was a slow dance, but at some point we figured out that I sort of got that what numbers they were looking for. I got that this is an important thing with seller financing. They didn't need that money to go do something else. They planned to put that money in the bank or to do another investment. But they did need that money. That money was part of their retirement plan. They didn't have a whole lot of money. This was a big chunk of money for them. And so that was an important thing. And so by the end of that first day conversation, I said, you know what? I'm not ready to give you a number, and because I'm shaking in my boots. I'm not going to give a number. I don't know what I'm going to do here. So this is always an out you can have if you're a newbie. He said, let me go home, think it over, talk things over with my partner, and then can we meet tomorrow? Go ahead and set another appointment, because if you don't, you're going to go home and get terrified and not ever call them back again. And people do that. You just kind of
Yeah.
get afraid of doing it. So make an appointment, and that's what I did. Can I meet you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock? And so I'll have something written down. We can talk about the numbers. And so we did. We met the next day. And so I just like I talked about earlier, I presented two different options. One, I would pay them cash. And I'm trying to remember, this has been a while back now, but I think I offered like 95,000 cash.
Okay.
That number might not have been good at this point. I think I would offer less today, but this was not the best deal I ever did. But
Right. It's your
I'll show you.
first.
Yeah, it's my first deal, and I still made money on it though. It was a crazy thing. So I offered like 95 cash, and I offered her asking price 115 if she would finance the house to me.
Okay.
So it's probably a little bit too much, but I offered her 115, and here's how it worked. I was going to pay her $2,500 down, because that's what I had in the bank. I didn't have a lot of cash, but she needed a little bit of money to pay the gas bill that the tenant had done and the carpet they had to put in. So it's just a little bit. It was not a huge down payment. 2,500 down, and the balance of 112,500 on a note at $550 a month.
So what's the interest rate on that? And was it just straight amortization? You just got the interest rate and divided it over a number of months?
It was an amortizing loan, and I believe it was about 4.5 or 4.2% interest. I'd have to go back and look at that, but it was in
Mm-hmm.
the fours, was the
Mm-hmm.
interest rate, which for me was good. I think 5.5, 6 was the number that I could have gotten at the bank at the time. So I thought, okay, I'm getting a below market interest rate, and I had a 30-year amortization, but I wanted to go for 30 years, and we went back and forth, and they really, really did not want to go that long, and so they only wanted to go 7 years.
Mm.
And what I chose to do it. This is my first deal again. Today I wouldn't do that. I want to get a longer time period. But what we did was called a balloon. Basically, 7 years from now, whatever I owe at that time, I'm paying 550 a month, just like it's a 30-year loan. But whatever I owe 7 years from now, I've got to pay them at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like a race. You got a race to try to get. And I don't recommend balloons. I like, if you're going to do one, I like to have it set 10 years, 15 years, 20 years out, because you have more time to sell the property, refinance, do some things. So anyway, those are the basic terms of 550 a month, $2,500 down, $112,000. And so to your point about the technical part, so what happened? What we did was we signed a contract, and just like your standard realtor contract, we used that to put the price and the names and everything, and who we're going to close with, and who's paying closing costs. But there was just basically a blank page addendum that we attached to that, and on that addendum, you just almost like a narrative, like a story. You write out exactly how this financing is going to work.
Okay.
Seller is going to buy it for this price. I mean, the buyer is going to buy it for this price. The buyer is going to pay $2,500 as a down payment. The buyer still owes the seller $112,500. The seller has agreed to finance that balance. And here's how that financing is going to work. It's going to be 4.25% or whatever the interest rate was. The payments are going to be $550 a month. The payment is going to start 30 days from now. And it doesn't have to start 30 days from now. That's what's really interesting. And this is a good point to mention this, is that one of the things I love, love, love about seller financing is how if you can learn and study the terms of financing, it is wide open. And every one of those terms, interest rate, payment amount, the time your payment begins, the amortization, even there's some more complicated kind of terms you can get into, like substitution of security and first right of refusal. You don't need to know all those things right off the bat, but if the more you study this stuff, you're sitting down face to face with a person, you can negotiate every single one of those terms, and every single one of those terms can make you some money. And so just for an example, what if I would have known this then as a beginner, I might have asked them to give me 60 days or 90 days and just freeze all interest for 90 days. Said there's going to be zero payments for the first 90 days. Why does that help me? How does that make me money?
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
it makes
you save it for the renovations you might need to make to rent it out.
Yeah, so because I'm not getting any rent day one, I don't want to be making a payment day one, and so that they are as a seller, they're not a bank. They're not giving me money. They are financing equity, and that's a big difference. They are not giving me a pile of cash and saying, "Here, Chad, here's the money." What they're doing is they're taking $2,500 down and they're waiting on the balance, and so they might be willing to wait 90 more days for their first payment or 180 days. Or I've had some situations where the deal did not work if I made a payment for the first 3 years. I said, my first payment starts 3 years from now. I'll give you 5,000 bucks today, and my next first payment will be 3 years from now. They were
You've done
motivated.
that?
I did it. I did it. Yeah.
Wow. Do you keep you just keep pushing that envelope, don't you? Like,
Yeah.
how far am I gonna
Well,
get with this? But
I
that's
mean,
amazing.
yeah, it's a negotiation. And yeah, I didn't start off that way. I mean, somebody said, I offered them something else, and they said, I can't do that. And I want to have a higher price. I said, well, if you want me to pay a higher price, here's what I can't make a payment for 3 years. And so, there's a lot of nuances there. But the point is, and this is why I think it's worth all your audience to get to know this stuff, is because it's all negotiable. And it's you and a person sitting across from each other at a card table. And if you can get that person to know who you are and to know that you're sincere and know that you're trustworthy, then you're not applying for a loan with a big stack of papers with your whole history. You're sitting across from a person who can say yes or no. And I find that to be, for me at the time when I didn't have a job and I'm just having to hustle as an entrepreneur, that's really helpful because I can now go acquire properties with 2,500 bucks and some hustle.
Did you
And you can do it
say
over and over and over again.
I don't have any? What did you say? Did you say I'm not a W-2, so I use seller financing? Because they might have. Did they ask you, so what are you doing looking for seller financing deals? And what was your response to that?
Well, I say I'll do either. I'll say I'll pay you cash, or or if you want to get, I don't focus on me as much as I focus on them.
Okay.
I say I will do this if it's beneficial to you, because really they don't care about me. I mean, they do care about me to the extent that, somebody they can trust. But once we get there, they really don't. They just want to know, why is this good for me? And so I like to turn it around that way and say, why is it good for you? Okay. Well, one thing is you can get a little bit higher price than my other price. My other price is 95,000. This price is 115,000.
Do
That's
you
one deal.
do you have any contingencies about what if you miss a payment? What about lawyers? What about foreclosing?
Hmm.
Can you go into those more technical aspects of it and how you find a real estate? So can you pretty much go to any real estate attorney and say I need a note drawn up for seller financing and most of them are knowledgeable, or do you have to be very specific about who you take
Yeah.
on to draw these papers up with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Finding the right attorney has been kind of like a journey for me for me. But yes, real estate attorneys can draw up a note, can draw up a mortgage for you. But what I'll say is that you need to be the driver of that ship. And so there's some basic education in terms of learning about the terms that are important to you. Because, well, I'll tell you one experience kind of to illustrate that. I went to a local attorney and I said, "Can you draw up a mortgage for the seller financing deal?" And to your point about what kind of terms are in there, I said, in our contract, the seller and I both agreed that there is no due on sale clause. No, so
Okay.
almost every mortgage in the world through a bank has a due on sale clause. My mortgage does not have a due on sale clause.
Okay.
Part one. Part two is there are these lists of terms. This is a non-recourse financing.
Mhm.
Right? And that's a very specific way of saying that this property and just this property is the collateral or the security for this equity that I'm agreeing to pay them. And so if something happens, and I like to use this when I'm talking to a seller, if I get run over by a bus, because I am not going to willingly not pay you money, but let's be real. Let's just talk about what we want to talk about worst case scenarios. If I get run over by a bus, if I'm incapacitated, I can't do this business anymore, you need to be protected. And so what you need to know is this property that you already know that you've owned from a long time, you would keep the down payment that I've made you, and then you could take this property back and resell it or do whatever else you need to do with it. This property is the security for this financing arrangement.
Okay, you call that non-recourse.
It's a non-recourse financing, yes.
Okay.
And so that's different. And so if you go to a bank and you pile up 10 loans with a bank, every single bank is personal recourse, meaning if I own a $500,000 in stocks over here personally, and I have this real estate and something
Mhm.
went really, really bad, then that bank can go take my stocks, they can take my
Mhm.
house, they can do everything else.
Mhm.
And so that's not to mean that I want to screw this person over or something. That's not what that means. That is it's just another give and take. It's a negotiation. And so I would rather have non-recourse on all my loans, and I would rather have it be just this loan, just this house. That's what I would want as a borrower. If the seller is insistent on having personal recourse, it's another negotiation point. But I've had very few times when that's ever an issue. With a bank, it would definitely be an issue.
So do you ever have to explain to them if I miss, say, 4 payments? Because say you do get hit by a bus and no one's taking care of that part of your business.
Right.
So if you miss 4 payments, do they ask about, I'll have to be the one that gets a lawyer and start
Right.
foreclosure proceedings unless you pay everything that's due and
Hmm.
back due payments. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that's written into the contract and
Yeah, so there's a default provision in the contract. So in mine would be 30 days. If I don't pay for 30 days, I'm in default, and they can
okay.
foreclose on me. So I don't do anything tricky with that. I keep that very very standard and boilerplate. Is that if I that's most mortgages. If you're 30 days behind, you're in default. They can call the loan. They can call the loan, meaning they can go and hire an attorney to foreclose on you. In my case, I tell them, I say, I hope this never happens. But if we had Great Depression number two,
Mhm.
I think people are refreshed by talking about worst case scenarios sometimes, by the way. I mean, I think you need to go there because they're already thinking about it. They're thinking, what's going to happen if Chad gets run over by a
Right.
bus?
So just
And so what
bring
I
it up to bring
bring,
it out to the
yeah,
open.
yeah, you don't have to bring it up in every gory detail, but you do need to address it when you're going through that contract. And what I say is, if we have Great Depression number two, and I'm an entrepreneur, I take risks. If things get bad and I can't make my payments to you, let's just say, for example, right now the rent's 850 on this house, and after the Great Depression, it's 350. And I'm paying my payment to you is 550. I can't afford to do that over the long run. And so what I will promise you is that I will come and talk to you if there's ever an issue, and I would rather work directly with you and see if we can work something out. And plan A would be is if you just want to take the property back, I would sign it back to you. If
Mhm.
you don't want to take the property back and you want to work something out, maybe we'll lower the payment for a period of time until the rents go back up, or maybe you could take the property back and I'll manage it for you.
Okay.
I mean, the cool thing about working with individuals, whether it's a seller or whether it's another private lender, is if things go bad, you're all in the same boat. We're
Yeah.
not going to try to fight with each other. If we're it's almost like a partnership in that we're in this together. We're both trying to make money together. And as long as you demonstrate that you're being sincere, you make your payments early every single month. You always communicate well. You do what you said you're going to do. You're building. This is what Stephen Covey in the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, which is one of my favorite books. He
Mhm.
calls that like an emotional bank account. That's literally when you tell somebody you'll do something and you deliver on that and you do it consistently, you're building up you're building up savings in that relationship. You're demonstrating that you have a wealth of trust with that person. And so later on in life, if something bad happens or you screw up or something, you can go to that person and you're not overdrawing that relationship. You're saying, you know what, I'm trying to be honest here. I screwed up. I paid too much for this property, or it's a Great
Mhm.
Depression number two.
Mhm.
Can we talk about this and figure out a way to change things to make it work for both of us because it's not working?
So 30 days late. Now I've been accidentally 30 days late on because you know how like your bill pay doesn't go out. So 30
Yeah,
days seems a little like stiff because sometimes I get a notice and I'm like, "Oh, that payment didn't go through," and it's like you didn't know. So the
right.
30 days seem a little tough,
Yeah,
but you just accept that and you just make sure that nothing gets screwed up with your bill pay. Like it's easy to lose a payment, say you have everything automatic and then you change bank accounts.
right.
Yeah, so sometimes it
Yeah,
is easy to miss, but like as soon as you're
yeah,
aware of it, you pay it immediately plus whatever's
right.
due.
Exactly. Yeah,
But
yeah.
30
I mean,
days.
yeah, you can do it differently. I mean, that's the thing. If you kind of have your business set up where you need to do it 45 days or 60 days, I haven't found like that's just the default and that's just what I've done and it hasn't been a problem. But yeah, you could arrange that differently, or my payments go out in bill pay like you do. And I had one recently where every single month for the last 10 years, this is somebody who seller financed it to me.
Yeah.
Every single month they get their payment. It's due on the 1st and I pay them on like the 27th. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit early. I like this 3 or 4 days early because they're like, nobody else is doing that. And they can count on it. And this was crazy because it demonstrated how important that is that my bank merged with another bank
Mm-hmm.
and their bill pay thing got screwed up. And
It
this new
happens.
bank did it like 3 days later than the prior bank. And she called me like on the 29th. And usually they're on the 27th. She's like, I'm just making sure. I haven't heard from her in like 7 years, you know? But she's like, I'm just making sure something's not going on. Is it wrong? I was like, 2 days. Wow, that's amazing. But we had a conversation. We said, yeah, our banks merged and that's what's happened. But I
Good.
wasn't late. But I'm telling you, that is why people when they start getting monthly payments, and you know this because you get rental payments, is that when you get used to those rental payments, you count on them. It's like a salary at your
Mm-hmm.
job, you depend on it. And you want to be that person they can depend on for those payments because they can then go use that to live their life. And they might be financially independent. They might have 3 houses that they sell to you and they finance them to you, and that's allowing them to go travel around or do something different. And so this is like it's something that one of these days, whenever I sell my rental properties, I will be very happy to finance my house to somebody else.
So default. So my experience with default is you're in default when you don't make your payments. Usually on a bank loan, it's 90 days.
Hmm.
They start the foreclosure. It's like
Yeah,
90 days late. And that just means it's due on sale unless you pay all the back payments plus all the late payments. But they're
right,
allowed to start foreclosures. So I
right.
guess it's the same exact thing. They're allowed to start foreclosure after 30 days. But
Yeah,
usually when you pay the back payments, they don't want to get a lawyer
I don't want to get
and
it back.
sue you. They just want you to pay. Like I want my
Exactly,
tenants to pay. That's all I
exactly,
want. I don't want to kick you out because it's more
exactly.
money. So
Yeah.
is that sort of the same boat that you find yourself in?
Yeah, they're going to call you. Like I said, they're probably going to call you 2 days later because you've been paying them on
And
time. But
that's
if something,
good.
that's good. But if you're 15 days, if a life event happens, what my recommendation is just talk to them, address it. I love making 90% of my payments to individuals like this. I can have a conversation with this individual because if something happens, if something comes up, they're a person. They'll probably understand, and they typically don't want this house back, and so
They're
just have
not
a
a
conversation,
bank
figure it out. Yeah, they're
where
not.
it's like some clerk who gets paid whatever, and they're like, I was told to do this. If I don't do this,
Yeah,
I get fired. So
yeah,
it has no human element. It is
yeah.
very much by the books. But it's a person, so all of a sudden, being that person is almost a good thing. As long
Yes.
as you're paying them on time each month, you have
Yeah.
a little bit more leeway than you would with a bank who's going straight for your credit report and this and
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, my idea of hell, Lisa, is sitting on hold at customer service with a big bank. I mean, I've done it. I used to do a lot of short sales where I bought properties with short sales, and I sat on hold for 45 minutes to an hour, on and off with that music going in the background. I want to talk to real people who I call them, they answer. Same with me, and that's another thing with this small business. I mean, when you get big and you get over, you have to have. I mean, I like systems. I'm an efficiency guy, but if you get so big sometimes if you don't do it well, you lose that people element. And that's
Hmm.
what you and I can do well. We're a small
Yep.
business. We have approachable, and this seller financing is the same thing. Is that you are selling yourself as an entrepreneur to these other people as a dependable entrepreneur who's got a service for them. The bank, I still go talk to banks. I still, some deals, and so that's not it's not like banks are bad or something, but there are trade-offs that we don't acknowledge when you go to a bank. And part of that's the terms, part of that's the personal guarantees on loans. But part of it is like what I learned in the 2008-9 downturn is that banks don't loan money when they're the best deals are out there.
Not
Banks,
when the market fell. They're
yeah,
like holding on tight. You're like, well,
yeah,
it cost 30,000 for a
hmm,
house that was 80.
yeah, yeah.
You're so
I mean,
right.
so there's so many deals, and so this is back to I've been doing seller financing and private money from the very beginning because I had to. But then once I've had some bankroll and I could go to the bank. I've got great credit.
Right.
They court me. They send me emails all the time. But in 2008 and 2009, where did I get the money from to do my deals? Private lenders, and some of the people who are now my private lenders started off as a seller financing person. I started making them that $300 payment. They liked that, and I said, well, and we met one time. I sent them a Christmas gift, and I said, do you have any other money you want to invest with me? I don't have to sell them on the idea. They know they've already got payments from me for the last 7, 8 years. And so now oh yeah, you have another deal? You can do this? I said, yeah, this time instead of 4%, I'll pay you 6%. And so now I got a private lender who loans me another 50 grand, another 100 grand at 6% interest for 10 years or 15 years. And so these small group of relationships blossom into something bigger
Mhm.
over time. And then that has real value in the marketplace, because when the market tanks and banks aren't loaning money, I call up my private lenders and say, man, there are some awesome deals now. Let's go get them. Let's go do some
Yeah.
deals. And you go buy them, because the bank, now we're buying when nobody else has any money.
It's like you're preparing for the big one, but you have to treat your relationships as if they're golden, as if they're a golden bridge to something better
Yeah.
where everyone becomes greater than their old. So, part of it's delivering. Like you said, you delivered for a year or 2 years on that promise
Mhm.
of payment every single month before you
Yeah.
approach them.
Right.
So that's built-in credibility that came from you just doing what you said you would do. But I always want to ask another little technical detail. So when you
Sure.
drop your amortization schedule, you have early payoffs if you want,
Yeah. Yep.
and you have the whole schedule like I have with my mortgage where it's like it maps out 360 months and
Yep.
it's like what's the principal interest payment and you have your lawyer do that as well?
Yeah. So yeah, and we didn't get enough of the details. So at closing, so we have a closing, just like you would with a bank, and that's what I tell them. I said we will not do anything different than a closing as if you were a bank. So just like we're going to have a closing with an attorney, you're going to get lender's title insurance. In my state, attorneys do all the closing. Some states, title agents do it. But however you do it in your state, you're going to do it the same way everybody else does, and you're going to have a mortgage. Meaning, and I explain what that is. They might not know exactly how that works. We're going to have an attorney draw up a mortgage. Here is a copy of what I normally use. If you want to have your family, somebody look at it, this is what we're doing.
Mhm.
Again, I'm not trying to pull one over on them. Here's the mortgage. Here's the piece of paper that's going to be your security for this financing.
How thick is
Sure.
it?
Um, Mine's 4 or 5 pages,
Okay. That's
and
nice.
I keep on jumping around here, Lisa, but earlier I told you that I hired an attorney to do my mortgage. I sent him the contract and said, here are my terms of my mortgage. Can you prepare a mortgage? And at closing, they forgot about that, and they came there with a mortgage, with like a Fannie Mae, conventional kind of mortgage, 30 pages with a due on sale, with all this stuff. And I said, hold on here. This is not, you didn't read my instructions in big bold letters in the email that says this is not, these are the terms of the mortgage. And so I learned at that point, what you need to do is you need to have just a sit down find an attorney in your town who specializes in real estate. And you might have
Mhm.
to go through 3, 4, 5 before you find one you're comfortable with, because this is not an everyday thing that
Mhm.
everyone's doing. But you're going to go to them and you got to be educated a little bit about what you're doing. And you say, I'm going to be buying some properties where an individual is going to be the lender
Mhm.
as opposed to a bank. And here's an idea I have. Here, I want to have a promissory note drawn up with these kind of terms. I want to have a mortgage drawn up with these kind of terms. Can you put that into legal form for me, and let's talk about it? And so you're going to spend a few $100 there for sure, having them draw that up. But now you're going to have an ally on your team who, instead of waiting till the heat of the moment when you're at closing, do it ahead of time, draw it up, have a conversation with that attorney. They might tell you some good stuff that you don't know in your state. They're like, hey, did you realize there's this law in South Carolina that you can't do this with your mortgage, that this and this and this? I mean, there's going to be very specific laws that they're going to need to plug in there. But the concept is the same everywhere, which is there's a promissory note, which is your
Mhm.
debt instrument. That's the piece of paper that says, I owe Lisa money. I owe
Mhm.
Lisa $50,000.
Mhm.
And in our case, that's called a seller carryback financing. It's a very specific kind of financing. Because again, Lisa didn't hand me $50,000, that she financed the balance of what I owed her as an installment sale. But that promissory note is what documents that. And then there's another piece of paper called the mortgage or the deed of trust,
Mhm.
which is the security for that debt that I owe. You have to have in both of those. You don't have to have both of those. You could have an unsecured promissory note, like a credit card, or you can have a mortgage which secures that promissory note. And that mortgage attaches that debt to that one specific property or to multiple properties. And so that mortgage you need both of those to go hand in hand.
I love it. So that is the lawyer part. And so the person who sold it to you, I guess, is happy to collect the rents each month. They can see a 4 or 5 page letter. But oh, I did have a question. Do
Mm-hmm.
you pay closing costs usually, or do you have the seller? Because you have the recording fees and the transfer tax, depending on what city. Um,
Yeah.
that the title company will come up with, and the titling company fees, which can be 600 to 1200 depending on the company you
Right.
choose. Who
Right.
usually does that? Is that one of your negotiation discussion pieces?
Mhm. Yeah. So we have a customary practice in South Carolina. There's nothing written that you have to do this, but it's typical that the seller pays for the transfer tax and for the preparation of the deed.
Okay.
So typically, it depends on the price of the property, but they might spend, in my case, like $100,000 house, they might spend 400 or 500 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
And I pay for the title search, I pay for the closing fee with the attorney or title company,
Mm-hmm.
and then I pay for any other costs having to do with surveys, appraisals, that kind of stuff. And so my cost might be anywhere from 900 bucks to 1,200 bucks, somewhere in there.
I love this. So, you said you do seller financing so much, even though you can now go to a bank, you don't. I have
Right.
to agree. I had to learn to use unsecured personal loans over 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
um, and credit cards to do my deal. So I had to get a lower priced house, but within 3 to 5 years, you own everything free and clear. And
Right.
now that I can go to the bank, I don't because it's so much work. It's like six
Yeah.
weeks and tax stubs and questions and
Yeah.
paperwork. And who has a fax machine just like that? Commercial. I don't have one, and I don't want to
Yeah.
scan it because takes too long.
Yeah.
It's so easy. I can get a personal loan. I raised $55,000 for a renovation a few weeks
Mm-hmm.
ago in a day or two. All they needed to
Wow.
see were the pay stubs. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very interesting once you find these creative financing deals. So even though you have to do a little bit more work for them than
Right.
the standard, it's like, why would I waste my time with the
Yeah.
banks? And I think it's a very freeing feeling,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because you can just keep going and going and going as much as you can. And especially with yours, I still have my credit limits where my debt to income ratio starts to be skewed because of the high credit
Right.
installment loans. But,
Right.
maybe when I'm waiting, because about every 2 years, I pay those down enough where I can get another batch. But,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in the off season, it's like, hey, start sending out letters and
Yep.
having these conversations, and
Yep.
after 500 people, you talk to 4 or 5, you get
Mm-hmm.
that deal. Well, how many do you need in your fleet?
Exactly.
I only need
Exactly.
one a year, so if I get two,
Yeah.
3 or 4, it's
Yep.
worth it. So
That's, yeah, and so I think you're right. I think, and I think with financing is an intimidating thing for a lot of people when they get into real estate, and it's intimidating for people all the time. And
yeah.
I would just say there's not a right formula. You've done awesome with the way your formula and what you're doing. I've used a lot of seller financing and private money. Some people, like if you're working a job and you're an engineer and you're making 120 grand a year with
Right.
good credit, go use up your mortgages. If you can get 30-year mortgages at 4% right now in 2015, yeah,
Yes,
go for
sir.
it. That's great. I mean, there's nothing wrong inherently with that, but you gotta play the cards that you're given. And in my case, the cards ended up being really good even later. And so, I choose today to pay 6% to a private lender instead of going to the bank and paying 5%. And because of a lot of reasons, because of the reasons we've talked about, some of the risk, some of the fact that I have a private lender who'll loan me money for 15 years,
Right.
whereas if I go to get a commercial loan at a bank, they have a 3 year or a 5 year balloon, and I don't want to, and the terms are not as good. I have to pay 15-year amortizations or 20-year amortizations instead of 30-year amortizations. And so there's a lot of, it doesn't mean the bank loan won't work out in some circumstances, but for me at least, it's been private money, seller financing have been the way I could do it at first, and they've been the way that's made me the most money long run.
So, what would be your key takeaways or biggest piece of advice of people who are scared and nervous about this so they can get started on this task? And after that, can you tell us a little bit more about where people can find you afterwards and
Sure.
anything about your business currently that you want them to know?
Yeah. So I mean, takeaway wise, again, I want to go kind of let's get simple again. I think the main thing we started with talking about your why.
Yeah.
Why are you even getting into this business? And get clear on that because real estate is an awesome vehicle. You and I are kind of like real estate nerds.
I love it.
We like
Woo!
talking details, and I mean, I do it for fun. I read real estate books, but the fact is, it's a vehicle. It's like a car that we're driving to get somewhere. And so, what is that somewhere you're trying to get? Get clear on that, and use that. And then when you get into the real estate stuff, get very very focused on one. You can't get you're going to get overwhelmed with all even the stuff I talked about today. You're probably like, what the heck is he talking about? All these terms and this and this and this. But if you find one niche or one idea if you've been trying to, listen to Lisa, and Lisa's talking about these kinds of properties and kind of middle to low income neighborhoods in this price range, focus on a neighborhood, choose a little niche, find something that's bite sized that you can handle,
Right.
find a location, find one concept, and figure out that one concept, because that's how we all started. I mean, I had one little concept that I knew how to do it, and I just went out and bang, 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 just tried to do that one thing. And that's the way all of us start. I watched my little 2 year old learn how to talk. It's just been amazing is to see how much she just stumbles along and screws up and,
Right.
doesn't say things right. And, but we as adults, we're so afraid to do these little newbie things because we haven't been a baby for a long time. But you got to make a fool of yourself a little bit.
A
You got
little
to get
bit.
out there, just try it, and you got to start with something really, really simple, and you got to be okay with that. We have all, from the people who are doing amazing things and buying hundreds and hundreds of houses to everybody started with one little property, and so
And a lot
don't
of mistakes.
yeah, don't worry about it. You're gonna don't take yourself too seriously. Just get started. Be okay being a beginner, and find your little niche. And I think you'll be fine.
Cool. And where we can find you if anybody else wants to follow up, because you
Yeah.
do have an expertise in there. Honestly, if I start looking for seller financing, I think I might have to call and hire Coach Carson, and I would
Thank
have
you.
absolutely no hesitation to do that. So,
Thank
can you
you.
tell us where we can find you?
Sure. Yeah. So I write at coachcarson.com. So coach, I go by coach. I used to be a football guy in sports. So I like to, as you can see, I like to have the chalkboard, and I like to just get back down to basics. And so I write a weekly newsletter that I'm spending a lot of time on now that I love to follow up with people. And I send articles about seller financing, about creative financing, but I also get into, I call it's my business money life project. And so I've been going down, I'm like you, Lisa, I have hundreds of books on my shelf that I've been reading for years. And I'm basically taking my favorite 500 ideas from my real estate books, from my business books, from my, life philosophy books. And each week I share one of those ideas in my newsletter. And so it gets into a lot of stuff. It gets into why you're doing this, into travel. It gets into personal finance and financial independence, a lot of nuts and bolts about real estate. And so if you go to coachcarson.com, and I've actually put together a little guide on seller financing that just for your audience. So if you go to coachcarson.com/Lisa,
Yay!
and I'll have some links there. You can sign up, and I'll have some links on some seller financing articles, some videos that I've done that sort of diagram how this seller financing works. So if you're interested in it, you can follow up and get that for free, and just check it out, and you can stay in touch with me that way.
All right. Thank you so much. I learned a ton. Um, I hope you guys learned a ton. This is really valuable. There's all sorts of real estate investing blogs, but for me personally, as well as for you, it's that first story and getting into these details that make me a lot more comfortable with going out and doing it versus some high level, I don't know, everything was perfect and this is how easy it is. I want to hear about the mistakes and how it was your first, but how you learned. And
Right.
so I thank you very much, Chad, for starting your
Sure.
blog. Just like me, you just wanted to share. You weren't born
Hmm.
rich. I wasn't either. We want to put this out to as many people as possible so they can use it as a vehicle to get what they want because it's an amazing thing. My goal is for everyone to have this knowledge so the world will be literally a better place. I think you
Yep.
have the same goal in mind. The more people we get this out to, the more the world can really start changing. And I mean, both want to be part of this revolution where we don't need the banks, we just need ourselves, a little elbow grease, and a little determination, but willingness to talk to each other as humans, not as some big corporation, to
Yep.
really, really change the dialogue in this country. And thank God for the internet, so that we can call it like, so we
Absolutely.
can find out about people like you and spread
Yep.
the message and try to show everyone else that there's different ways of doing this outside of what we've been taught and told. So thank you so much for coming on this show.
Well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
So again, it's if you want to go visit up and get a little bit more, coachcarson.com/Lisa, and he's working on a newsletter where he's going to give us his ideas on life, business, and real estate. And judging from his last 13 years, I am a devoted fan. I mean, there's a lot he has to share. He's not just one facet. All of us are multifaceted, so it's nice when someone packages that up to try to help people with what they're going through in their own lives. So, this is Lisa Phillips with AffordableRealEstateInvestments.com. It's where I give you an honest and practical guide to real estate investing at a price you can afford. Thank you so much.